Here I've got a 2002 Toyota Camry. This belongs to a subscriber of mine slash viewer. He told me if I was going to record any videos on his car to not make fun of his radio. So we're going to make sure to not do that. Yeah, so definitely no looking at his radio. So he did some work on the car himself, but some things just didn't turn out right. Like he replaced the front struts and even the top mounts for the strut. But I'll show you guys in a second how it's just not sitting right. So I'm gonna have to remove the struts once again and see what's not right, and we'll get it fixed. What else am I doing? Rear camber bolts, because the rear alignment is off, as you guys can see right here. So we have camber bolts to put back there, and front sway bar bushings, rear sway bar bushings, and I think that's gonna be it. So underneath the hood here, we can see what's going on with the struts. That does not look right. Let's go look at the other side. And pretty much the same exact thing on this side. So we're gonna have to tear all of this back apart, find out what's wrong here. I wonder if these top hats are the same, like same part number, like you could put them on either side of the car. If you look at this one, it has like a slant down, but like facing towards the front of the car. And that one, the slant down, is facing towards the back of the car. But that's definitely not right, and it actually makes a good amount of noise while driving. You could hear like clunking coming from up front. I'm sure that also has something to do with the front sway bar bushings as well. So I went on Rock Auto real fast and looked up these strut mounts right here, and it turns out it's just one part for the front. There's no left or right, so that's good. So here I am digging into this, and you can see we have a good amount of new parts. Like I said, the strut is new. We have new rotor, new pads, new caliper. It looks like a new outer tie rod, new stabilizer link, even a brand new bellow. It even got brand new CV shafts. You can see that. But there's a few things I want to point out, and I'm not talking crap. I'm just, take it as constructive criticism, because it's the reason why I make YouTube videos in the first place. And I encourage people to learn how to do things themselves, But here's a few things that I'm noticing that are just popping out. See this? It's completely loose. So that bellow can come right off. And if we go on the front right side, it's something I already noticed. That bellow has completely came off of the rack and pinion. And we could actually just see it from up here. Turn off my light real fast. You see the bellow down there? It has come off of the rack and pinion. It should be pushed all the way back, but it's not. So that needs to be corrected. It's going to let water and all kinds of crap inside of there where the rack and pinion's at. And then another issue is, so I removed the nut for the strut right here, because of course we got to get the strut out. And this top nut was very tight, okay? But the bottom one, this is loose. I haven't even touched it yet. I did not touch that. You hear that? I could feel plenty of play right here. This nut isn't even tight, and if I spin the whole thing, look. Okay? So that's another thing that needs to be fixed. All right, with the strut out of the car, you could see how that is not sitting flat right there. It's at an angle. That's where the problem's at. I don't know if the shaft on this strut has a key, like it can only go on one way and it's not lined up. And that's why this nut isn't fully torqued down, because this plate hasn't gone in as far as it needs to. Yeah, it's probably not lined up. The last strut I did, they had the same exact design where you got to make sure that keyway lines up, or things just aren't going to fit. You can see that thing is not right. All right, so I got the strut taken apart, and this is what I was talking about. You could see the flat spots on the shaft right there. They have to align with those keys, basically. And if you look closely, you can see the two tabs right there. They're kind of like ground down, like they've been rubbing. So that tells me they weren't aligned. So it's supposed to fall into place. Let's just say it was on here like that, when it should be on here like that until it falls into place and locks in. So that's one problem. The other problem is, you can see how this thing is slanted, right? Like this, it's at an angle, it's not flat. So this slanted part has to go facing towards the inside of the car. And I think the way it came off was it was faced towards the outside of the car. So that just really messes all kinds of things up. So it was really two problems here going on. So let's fix it and put everything back together. So I'm almost done installing the front left strut here, and when everything is put together correctly, you can see how the large portion of the top hat is pretty much inboard, okay? And if we go to this side, here goes the large section right here, and you can see it's facing out towards the car. That's wrong. This thing should be over here. All right, so I'm almost done on this side. I took off the stabilizer link, cleaned the threads because there was a ton of grease on them. Cleaned them till they were nice and dry. Put a little bit of blue thread locker on it, and I torqued this thing down, and now it's nice and solid. There is no more looseness, no more clunking coming from that. So I'm gonna wait on connecting the top half. I'll do that later. Right now, what I'm trying to focus on is the bellow. So this clamp thing right here was completely loose, so I just took it off. It's going to get a zip tie back there. I use zip ties all the time, and I've never seen, or to my knowledge, they seem to hold up well. But besides that, you can see this bellow end is flipped inside out. There should be a piece right here to put a clamp or a zip tie on, and it's actually pushed inside of there. So what I'm trying to do right now at the moment is trying to get that thing to pop out, but it's proving to be quite difficult to get this thing out. So I'm gonna keep messing with this, see if I could get that thing to turn inside out. And there we have it. I got it to come out, and now we could put a zip tie right there. Ideally, I like to put clamps right here, but it's too late now. The outer tie rod's already on it, and I'm not gonna go messing with this stuff, you know, because of the wheel alignment and that type of stuff. So it's gonna get a zip tie right here. I ended up using this tool right here. It's basically just a prying tool for like the lids on paint cans. You know how you get this underneath the lid and it helps you open a paint can. So that's what this is for. I just kind of went inside of there and grabbed the lip and pulled it out as I pushed the bellow back, and it just helped to roll the lip over and get it to pop out. Hope that makes sense. And there we have it. There was one zip tie right there and the other one. All right, so I tried tugging on it, and the bellow doesn't come off of the rack and pinion, so that's good. Now I'm here on the front right side. You can see this bellow actually has a clamp where it's supposed to be. But back there, this is where I showed you guys earlier how it's not even on the rack and pinion anymore. So I'll go ahead and remove this like steel zip tie, and we'll put a regular zip tie on it and put it back where it belongs. So I got the zip tie on it back there, and that thing is not coming off. It's nice and snug. Now what I also noticed is if you pull this back right here, you're gonna find a groove on the inner tie rod, and you see it right there. That groove is where, you know, this piece is supposed to land, and that's where you put the clamp over it. Well, I actually found this piece of the bellow like way over here with the clamp on it. So what that does is once you turn your steering wheel, there isn't any of that slack in the bellow to take up the space, I guess. So it overextends itself and ends up pulling off of the rack and pinion. Now, I don't like those clamps. They work well if you have the space to properly clamp them down, but most cases you don't. That's why I don't like them. So you got to make sure that this thing falls in its little groove, and that's where it's supposed to sit, just like that, and then you put the clamp on it. I got the stabilizer link disconnected from the strut, and that lower nut wasn't as loose as the front left side, but I still was able to get like a good quarter of a turn out of that nut. So it still needs to be tightened up just a hair. Not too bad. Let's go ahead and get the strut out of here. With the strut out of the car, we could get a closer look at it. You could see something isn't right here. Basically, to me, it looks like this lower plate is like slanting that way, and the top plate is slanting this way. And that's why it's making contact right there. To me, it kind of looks like the alignment dowels might be lined up and all of that's all set. So we might be able to just rotate this whole upper assembly and get this thing where it's supposed to be. So I did have to put this one in the spring compressor just because there was too much tension on the top hat from the spring, and I couldn't rotate this thing that easy. So by doing that, I rotated it to what I think it's supposed to be. And you can see they're no longer touching. Once it goes back on the car and the weight is put on the vehicle, all this stuff is going to level out. So let's go ahead and put it back on.
It's me from the future. It's the next day, and I wasn't really happy with how this turned out. The clip you guys just saw. So I took it back apart this morning, and it turns out I rotated the top hat so that was where it's supposed to be, but I didn't rotate the bottom plate. And as you can see, everything is perfect now. That's how it should be. Nice, decent gaps all the way around. And something I just noticed, one thing that the other side didn't have because
of all the rust, is if you look at the plate right here,
it actually says out. So that's real neat. That would save a lot of trouble. Like I said, the front left strut, this whole plate was completely rotted away. You couldn't make out any letters on it. So this one's pretty much set. I'm just gonna go ahead, pop it back on the car, and you guys could continue with what I was doing last night.
I'm gonna get started on these sway bar bushings. I don't think I'm gonna record much because the subframe has to be dropped to get to them. It's a complete pain in the butt. You know, the frustration is gonna start to kick in, and yeah, I'm not gonna wanna record much. As you can see, I got out the bushings. The sway bar is just sitting up right there. It's not attached to anything, and you can see the subframe has been dropped down a little bit. Now 3 of the bolts came out without any issues, you know, fighting a little bit of rust, but nothing too crazy. But the last one, this thing was gonna snap off. It was not happy. There was just way too much rust on it. So thankfully we had access to the back side of it, and I was able to use the inductive heater to heat up the nut that it threads into, and then this thing came out like butter afterwards. As you can see, I already cleaned up these 2 bolts with the wire wheel. I still have to clean both of these, and then I can put the new bushings on it, and this thing's pretty much good to go. So I'm just about done here. Got the stabilizer links reconnected. New sway bar bushings are installed. Everything's torqued down. The subframe is back in place. All the bolts are in it. And that's going to pretty much wrap up the front end here. Now, I considered all of this stuff to be the difficult work, so I'm glad I got it knocked out tonight. It's about 10 p.m., so I'm going to throw in the towel. So the front end is pretty much complete. I got the car back on the ground, and I've been moving it back and forth, turning the steering wheel, and you can see how everything looks nice and centered here. No weird noises while I turn the steering wheel, and pretty much the same exact thing over here. Everything looks real good, just how it should look. So now I'm at the rear end installing the rear cam bolts, or camber bolts. This is pretty much what it is right here. It's almost like a regular bolt, but it's, as you can see in the center, it has like an off-center round on it, almost like a camshaft. So this end is pretty much flat, and then this end has like a lobe on it. So as you rotate the bolt, it's going to change the angle of the knuckle. So I already got one of them installed right here. And I put this wheel bearing removal tool on here just to show you guys. And I have my digital angle gauge. So I'm going to go ahead and rotate the cam bolt. You can see I got it on here. I'm just going to rotate it with my ratchet. And we're going to see the angle change. So we're starting off at 1.7 degree. All right, I'm just going to go ahead and start rotating the bolt now. You can see how it changes the angle of camber. So now I'm just going to go the other way, and we should end up right back where we started. Now I'm not saying this is an alignment because I'm not doing an alignment. I'm just showing you guys how this whole camber bolt thing works. And there we go, we are back at 1.7. So of course the car needs to go in for a proper wheel alignment. But I just thought it was neat, and I had the opportunity to show you guys how these things actually work. Okay, so that cam bolt is all done. I got the new bushing installed on this side, and you can see one of the bolts actually snapped off. So I had a fun time trying to extract it, but I got it out. So it's got all 3 bolts put in it, and everything's good. I put anti-seize on those threads to try to protect them, make sure they don't get rotted in place and snap off next time. But this is looking good. This whole side is done. I'm gonna go do the same exact thing on the rear right side, and we'll take it out for a test drive. So I'm out test driving this Toyota, and it's driving pretty smooth. I'm pretty happy with the way it turned out. Everything's nice and quiet. I don't hear any weird noises or anything like that. I think Scotty Kilmer would be proud of this car. It's driving pretty good. But there are a few things that need to be addressed. Number one, it needs to go in for another wheel alignment because we dropped the subframe, so that throws the alignment right out the window. We put camber bolts in the rear, so again, that messes with alignment. But here's the thing. It needs more work done. the rear struts are blown out. If you're going to change the struts, you might as well change the rear stabilizer links. So all of that would have to get done before you take it in for wheel alignment, my recommendation. That way you don't have to keep getting wheel alignments done. You know, just get it done once and that'll be it. The brake pedal feels a little mushy to me. I think the system needs to be bled a little bit more, but he also wants to get the rear shoes, drums, and wheel cylinders done. So obviously there's no need to bleed the system anymore if you're going to open up the brake system one more time to get all that work done. So that work needs to get done first. So it's just a bunch of little things. The owner put a ton of work into this car, and it shows, because the car is actually driving pretty decent, you know, considering its age. It drives better than half of the piece of junk that come into my garage. So I'm happy with the way it turned out, and I'm pretty sure the owner is going to be happy with it. With that being said, I think it's pretty much ready to go. So I'm just going to go ahead and park it, and this thing will be... Whoa! What's up with that radio? I'm just messing with you. That's it for this car. Got this Mustang back in the garage. It's been a while since we've seen this car. I don't know if you guys remember. It's that convertible Mustang. Remember we put the front bumper, the grill, the headlights on it. The owner has not been driving it much, and now I guess she's selling it to her sister. So her sister bought the car, but the car got pounded, okay? So she just paid $600 to get the car out, and it didn't last very long after coming out the pound because there's already problems. I think potential overheating, smoke coming out the exhaust, and something keeps killing the battery. You can see it is a brand new battery. Right now I got it on the trickle charger because it came in completely dead. It just got towed in last night. So she mentioned something about it overheating. So this thing's completely filled with antifreeze, and I decided to take the cap off the radiator, and this thing is just in pieces. So this is exactly how it came off. Okay, so this cap is no good. I mean, and that's how it was, just like this. Let me demonstrate for you guys. That right there is exactly how it was on. Looking inside of there, just see a bunch of crap. Don't really see any coolant. So yeah, I'm not surprised this thing is overheating. I'm sure it's leaking antifreeze from somewhere. All right, so I filled the system up with water just so I could pressurize the system, see where it's leaking from, but there's no need to pressurize it because I can already see that the water pump is leaking. You can see it dripping right there. See it? So it's a pretty bad leak. That's why this thing was empty. And yes, the engine shut off on them while they were driving because the car was overheating. So there's a potential here for a damaged head gasket. I don't know if any damage was caused. So yeah, it needs a water pump at least. And there is something draining this battery. Now, of course, these battery cables all mangled up. I told her about this a while ago. I mean, look at this ground side. Look at all the corrosion inside of there, you know. So it's no good. And then, you know, this is just a hot mess right here. But, you know, that's not the cause of the battery being drained. Something is draining it. It doesn't even have a radio. The radio has been torn out of this thing. See, we have no radio. So what is draining the battery? We don't know yet. All right, guys, so it's about, I don't know, 3 weeks to a month later. The Mustang is still here. You can see it even has a tow ticket on it. So once they put this sticker on it, they give you 7 days to move the car or it's gonna get towed. So right now it's like the 6th day of this sticker being here, so I went out and moved it. And what I'm going to do is basically take the sticker off, try to take off any of these markings off of the windows, you know, from the tow company that they put on here when it gets towed to the pound. And the owner is gonna come pick it up and take it back home because it's a long crazy story. Basically, the car got pounded, right? And the owner said, screw it, it's too much money, it's not worth the car. They wanted like $600 to get the car out, and the car just needs so much work. She said, I'm just gonna leave it there, they keep it, do whatever they want with it. And then her sister wanted the car, so her sister paid the $600 to get the car out of the pound, and then brought it directly over to me so I could fix what's wrong with it so she could drive it back, because she doesn't live here. She lives somewhere else, so the car needs to be drivable for the hour or the couple of hours drive that she is away from here. Okay, so basically make the car driving decent. Anyway, the point is, her sister, turns out that she's getting married and all her money is tied up in this wedding. So that's why the car sat here for so long and nothing is getting done with it. And I got to a point where I told her, hey, you're gonna have to move this car, because what's happening is exactly this. The police don't just circle around. What usually they don't, they just don't circle around and see a car that's sitting and they put a tow sticker on it. Basically, someone called, okay, someone who lives here in this area called, and that's just how people are around here. If they see a car sitting for a few days, they call the police on it. And you know, hey, abandoned vehicle. And it doesn't look good when there's a vehicle with all these writings all over the glass to just be sitting on the street. Of course it's going to draw someone's attention, right? So I told her, hey, I could fix it. The main thing is, I mean, the car needs a ton of work, but the main thing stopping this car from actually driving any type of distance is the water pump that's just pouring out. Okay, so that water pump needs to be fixed, because it's going to continue to overheat. You're not going to get anywhere with this. And that's the tip of the iceberg of things that need to be done on this car. So until they could come up with the money to actually get the car fixed, she has to take it back to her house, park it. I don't know, not the person who owns the car now, her sister, okay, the one who originally owned this car. She has to take the car back. And I told her, you could bring it back once we got all the money to start getting it fixed, but until then it can't sit here any longer. So that's where we're at. I brought it into the garage just to take all this crap off of the windows and basically fill up the cooling system with water, because it's going to be just enough so she could drive it home. By the time she gets home, who knows, all that water might have already dumped out, you know, via the water pump leaking. But yeah, I'm just gonna do what I can just so she could drive the car out of here, and that's it. And of course I had to use my jump starter to get it started when it was parked on the street out there, because I just turned it off, and this is what we have. So I got this thing on a charger, and you can see this thing has 3 different settings. It has a trickle charge, like a medium speed at 10 amps, and then a quick charge at 20 amps. This right here is saying that the battery is full, but I never believe this thing. Whenever I use this device, it just seems to be all over the place, so I don't trust any of this stuff. I had it on 10 amps for like 5 minutes, and I'm like, oh, screw it, let's just crank it up. Because like I said, we don't have much time to charge this before the owner comes to pick it up. So hopefully on this setting it might do something. All right, it's about, I don't know, maybe like 2 weeks later. At this point, this car has been here for like a month already. So we are back. We got a new water pump, thermostat housing, and gaskets, of course. The bare minimum to get this thing driving. Okay, so last time we took the battery out and we charged it overnight. And right now I connected the battery while it was out on the street, and it started right up, no issues at all. The battery was nice and strong. So of course I disconnected it once again. We don't need whatever is draining the battery to continue to drain it. So let's start to tear into this bad boy and get this new water pump and thermostat installed. Oh, and I got a new radiator cap. You can see I put the new one on it already. Here goes the old one in pieces. So that's good, right? It's a selling point. I got the thermostat out. See it right here. Here's the housing. And looking at this gasket, tell me this thing wasn't leaking. How nasty that looks. So yeah, all this is getting replaced. We have a new housing. I got the thermostat housing and new thermostat installed, as well as a new gasket. The mating surface is all cleaned up. Everything looked real good. As you can see, I removed the lower hose. And now it's time to get this bracket out of here. In order to get this bracket off, you got to remove the power steering pump pulley, which, whatever, it's a shit design. But look how much play we have here. I don't know if that's normal, but I do know that the power steering on this car does not work. So the fact that we're taking off this pulley right now, this would have been the ideal time to change that pump. But that's not what it's here for. Remember, we're just trying to get the water pump done so the car is drivable, despite its other flaws. So let's go ahead and remove this. Yeah, this just feels like crap, just turning it by hand. Doesn't feel good. There's like loose spots, then there's tighter spots. It's just got my tool all set up right there. And I'm actually pretty excited to do this, because for the longest I've always had this like cheap eBay power steering puller set. You can see it was a snap-on. And that's the one I've always used. I mean, it's not the greatest. The metal on it is kind of like shit quality, so it's easy to like break or deform things. So I went out and bought this OTC set, and I've actually had it for like over a year, and this is the first time I'm able to use it. So let's see how well it works. I'm pretty excited about that. All right, guys, so far so good. It seems like the pulley is moving, and the tool seems to be holding up. That's my snap-on ratchet. Once in a while, the teeth will slip on it. I don't know, I've never had it rebuilt or anything by Snap-on, so maybe it's time. Definitely a workout. It's getting easier though. Just gotta stop and rest. I'm tired. And then my kneecaps are killing me. You know how it is when you're leaning over a car for just hours, and you know, with your kneecaps just constantly like pushing against the bumper of a car. You guys all know what I'm talking about if you work on cars. It's exhausting. Oh, there goes a pulley. Let's not let it fall in the antifreeze down there. That's it. And there goes my tool, like a dumbass. So here's the tool after very first use, and I don't see any signs of wear. Everything looks pretty good. As you can see, I greased up the threads as I always do with a tool like this. Now, I can tell you one thing, in the cheap eBay set, after the first time using it, I remember the threads were kind of galled up. And yes, I even put grease on those threads. Like I said, I always put grease when I'm doing a operation like this. But this one looks perfect. You can tell there's no damage at all to those threads. Whereas again, the eBay one, very first use, I mean, it still works, but the very first use you could see damage on the tool. So that's all good. It was a pulley off of the car, came off perfectly with no damage at all. And here's what we came for. Now we got access to the two bolts back here. We'll remove this bracket and start to remove the water pump. And before anyone asks, okay, this inside of here is PB Blaster. I did the math and added up the prices, and of course it's going to cost you more if you buy individual cans like this of PB Blaster. So what I did is I just bought a gallon of it, and I bought this little spray bottle, and just see how it works. Basically what it comes down to is this is more cost effective than to keep buying the cans. So I'm giving it a go, see how I like it. If I don't end up liking this method right here with the spray bottle, then I could always buy one of those like steel cans that you put the fluid in, and then you could just add compressed air yourself, and essentially turn it into one of these. And if the compressed air gets low, you just add more. Simple, right? But I figured this was simple enough. So I got the water pump out. See all the mess we got going on here that needs to be cleaned up. This pipe right here was a pain in the butt to get out. There's the old water pump right here on the ground. So at this point, it's just a matter of a bunch of cleaning. So let me go ahead and knock this out. All right, so I think I'm just about done cleaning here. Mating surface looks pretty good. And key here is to use a Dremel with a small wire wheel. As you can see, gets into real tight places to clean off any corrosion. As you can see, I removed the O-ring that sits right there on the pipe, and then I came here with the Dremel, and go all the way around it. Making sure to get inside the groove where the O-ring goes, and as well as the outside of the pipe, and that way all the corrosion is cleaned off of it. We put the new O-ring on it, and it's gonna seal up nicely. Now, I'm not gonna lie to you guys, when I was removing this thing, let me see, how do I explain this? So basically, you can see the studs are still in the block right here for the water pump, so I couldn't just move the water pump down. I had to get the pipe out here. So what I was doing was prying up on this to get this out of the water pump before I remove the water pump. I hope that makes sense. So anyway, I'm prying, and this thing goes in here deep, like a good inch, right? Inch and a half. So I'm prying, trying to get it up, and what do you see? I did not notice that when I was prying, so when it finally popped out, I heard something crack. And looking at this sensor right here, there is a crack right there. I don't know what this is. I want to say maybe a cam. Yeah, I want to say it's a cam sensor. If there is any issues with the car running or throwing a code for a cam sensor or blah blah blah, I know it's because I damaged it, and it looks like I'll be paying out of pocket for a cam sensor. So that sucks, but it was my mistake. I wasn't paying attention while I was prying up on this. So I ended up pulling out all of the studs. Number one, because it lets me clean the surface a lot better without the studs in the way. Number two, I can reseal the studs that need sealant on them because they go into water jackets, and some of them do. So that's a good thing to reseal them. And number three, it'll allow me to kind of slide the water pump onto this pipe right here with the new O-ring, and then I could start feeding in the bolts as opposed to the other way I took it off. The new water pump is installed and everything is torqued down. I put pretty much thread sealant on every single bolt, even the ones that I know don't need it. Still got some. Why not? Okay, so like I said, it's completely torqued down. And yeah, pulling out the studs is the way to go on this thing. I was able to slide in the pipe into the water pump housing, no issues at all with the new O-ring on it. And I used some silicone paste on the O-ring as well as the housing, just kind of spread it around inside of there, and that thing just slid right in like butter. Once that thing was in place, then I put the water pump in place, put all the bolts on it. Like I said, it's torqued down. This thing is pretty much ready to go. So let me slap on the bracket right here, and we'll put the power steering pulley back on. Got the lower radiator hose connected to the water pump. The pulley is pressed on. You can see it's flush right here with that piece. And this thing went on so tight, it was unbelievable. It was a nightmare to get that thing on. But the tool held up absolutely great. Everything looks fine. No issues at all with that. That pulley could have went on with half the amount of friction and it still would have been fine. It's beyond me on why they insist to make them like this, where the press fit is just so freaking tight. I'm gonna go ahead and take a break right now. It's time to go eat. It's, I don't know, what time is it? It's probably like 8 p.m. or something like that. So I'll be back. I had my food. I'm feeling a million times better. But guess what, guys? I'm eating a cookie now. You know what that means, right? Yeah, I'm quitting. Throwing in the towel for tonight. I've had enough. It's my money and I want it now. I don't know. I just heard that in a commercial a long time ago. Anyway, we'll cut to tomorrow because tonight I'm done. I came out here this afternoon and buttoned everything up. As you can see, we got the belt on it, got the hose on it, filled up the cooling system with brand new antifreeze, and I made sure to pull out that plug that goes right there to allow the air to escape out the system as you're filling it up. So everything's looking pretty good. Got the battery reconnected. Let's go ahead, crank it over, and start the bleeding process to make sure we get all the air out the system. Start it right up. And of course, power steering still does not work. This thing needs a pump. Yeah, so I'm just gonna start the bleeding process. Honestly, guys, the engine sounds a lot better with the new water pump on. It sounds a lot quieter, real smooth. And just keeping an eye on everything, I don't see a single drip of coolant. I don't see anything leaking, so that's a really good sign. I just realized that this thing has 225,000 miles on it. I'm actually impressed. I really am. As much crap as I talk about Ford or any other American car, that's actually really impressive. For the engine, at least, because the rest of the car is a piece of crap. Anyway, one of the concerns we were having was a possible head gasket issue, because the owner did drive it while it was overheating to the point where I believe it turned off, if I remember correctly. So I mean, it's not definitive or anything, but the fact that the engine is running, it started right up, there was no smoke or anything coming out the exhaust, and we have no pulses coming out the cooling system, all of that is all good signs. Like I said, it's not definitive, but it's all good signs. All right, everything's looking really good here. Like I said, the engine is running super smooth, sounds really good. So I'm just keeping an eye on my no spill funnel from right there, that little gap. So it was full of coolant, and then you could tell the exact point when that thermostat opens up, because the coolant level inside the funnel just completely drops all the way to the bottom, and then we start to get heat inside of here. And that's exactly what happened. We are now blowing nice hot air. So what I'm going to do is pretty much turn off the car, let the level like settle, and then I'll top off the coolant at the radiator and put the new cap on it. All right, so like I said, topped off the cooling system. It took almost nothing because it was pretty much already full. Put the new cap on it. It's pretty much all set. What I want to do is a relative compression test. Not that it really matters. Most likely we're not going to see anything, but I'm just excited that my tool is working once again. If you guys remember, I dropped this off a car, and ever since then it hasn't been working right. The touchscreen was sometimes unresponsive. Sometimes it wouldn't turn on. Sometimes it would randomly turn off. And I got to a point where honestly I was going to send it in for repair, okay? Just send it back to the company and have them fix it. But one day I plugged it in to charge it, and I kept getting a low battery, like low voltage warning sign on the screen. So I'm like, let me check the battery. It's a 18650 cell, just like this, okay? You can see I marked this one. It's a bad one. It's the one that was on there. So I checked it, and this thing had less than a volt. These things do not work at, at that voltage, okay? I think like a max is like 3.7 volts or something. And yeah, less than a volt, of course it's not going to work, right? So instead of sending it out, I'm like, you know what? Let me buy a battery for this thing. So I went online, bought an 18650 cell, popped it in. This thing has been working great. Turns on every single time. It's not turning off anymore. Touchscreen is responsive. And of course, I'm here kicking myself in the head. I'm like, why didn't I think to check the battery? I would have been so embarrassed if I sent this thing in for repair and then they send it back to me with an email saying, hey, it was just a battery. Like, I would have felt so dumb. Anyway, so let's go ahead and do a relative compression test, only because I'm excited to have my tool working once again. Sorry, it's hard to sit in here. This like driver's seat isn't even bolted down. It just moves around way too much. But key on, pedal to the metal, and let's keep an eye on the scope out there. Okay, that's good. All right, sorry about that, guys, but I had to change my method up a little bit. Basically, I tried both of my current clamps, and the scope, it kept basically being triggered as if I was cranking. And I think the reason for that is this thing has a crazy like parasitic draw. So every time that current clamp sees something being pulled, it starts the capture, which I don't want, because it doesn't give me enough time to actually get in the car and crank it. Before I know it, the thing's already like done, and it's trying to, you know, analyze the waveform. So what I ended up doing is going directly to the battery using AC coupling. And this is the second time I do this test with pretty much the same exact results. I'll go ahead and put a picture on the screen so you guys could see the first test. And basically, you see we got one cylinder at 100%, and look at the rest of them. Okay. Honestly, I'm not that surprised, guys. Like I said, 200 and what, like 25,000 miles, I said? That's a lot of miles. But it still runs fine. There's no misfires or anything like that. It's just interesting to see what the relative compression test is showing us. And like I said, I did the test twice and pretty much the same results. But yeah, the scope is working. No more issues. Really happy that it works. All right, so that's it. I'm done. When I had it running right now, I'm checking the heat. It's still blowing nice hot air. Everything's good. The coolant gauge is right in the middle where it's supposed to be. Everything's looking a-okay as far as the new thermostat, the housing, the water pump, all that stuff. So I'm gonna go ahead and pull this turd out of the garage, and they can come pick it up.